Hello again.
Hi.
In a union day.
What?
In a union day.
Inner Union Day. It's freaking Inner Union Day. Woo! Woo! Hey. Um.
So, my
Yeah.
first question for today's direction
Thank you.
is going to be around something that we both went through, in my belief, which is addiction. And so, first, I'd love to know, what does addiction mean to you in simple form?
I feel like for me, addiction is escapism. It's escaping the present. For me, it's escaping the body, escaping just feeling. So I think that we get addicted to whatever it is that's taking us outside of what is in the now. And it can be pain or pleasure or based on patterns, I think, that we've been in, cycles that we are comfortable in or feel safe in. And so it just becomes this loop, this addictive cycle of wanting to feel safe, wanting to feel discomfort of all that we've known.
So, I'm hearing like this cycle of wanting to escape the pain and land into like comfort. It's this beautiful cycle. Thank you. So for
What
me,
about you? Yeah.
for me, addiction is when I'm seeking pleasure in some form. So it's very similar to what you're saying. It's like leaving something that's painful. You could call it escapism, to something that's pleasurable, whether it's eating some food, having a cigarette, taking drugs, whatever. But then the addiction piece comes in, is like when I have a belief that that thing has power over me. It's like, I can't stop this. I can't choose not to do it anymore. And then it becomes like this thing that has taken the power away, basically.
I love that. That's really powerful. Yeah. I feel like that shifts into so many different things, obviously. You know, as soon as we give our power away to anything, it's this need or desire of not feeling like we're whole on our own, obviously. This like awareness of, that we're not whole on our own. And that we need something external outside of ourselves to provide something for us or to create that wholeness for us. So it's this like void, but instead of going into the void, we want to escape that void because it's so scary. And so we end up filling ourselves with external pleasures or temporary pleasures or whatever it is, to continue this cycle until we're able to like face that void, the black hole. That's actually where all the gold is, right? Is in the depths of what that is. And I was actually just journaling about that today, or writing about it today, actually, about like suffering and how we come into this world, which brings into like karma and all this stuff, but how when we came here, we had to suffer and we had to go through this like space of suffering, to then understand the purpose that that suffering was serving, this greater mission, this greater vision. And if we came here and everything was perfect and everything was awesome, we wouldn't have been able to go through that alchemy, that alchemical kind of chemistry that is needed to create the gold, right? Like gold needs the lead to turn into gold, right? So it doesn't just, it's not just gold.
A great way of explaining it for me is like, to have gold, you have to have something that is not gold. To have pleasure, you have to have something that is not pleasure. It's like the polarities.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one of my first questions here is, what unmet need or unresolved emotion is your addiction trying to soothe?
What unmet need or emotion is my addiction trying to soothe?
Yeah.
Definitely, I would say comfort is a big one. A feeling comfort, nurtured, feeling like this like home kind of feeling.
So if there was a wound associated with that comfort, what would it be?
I would say of not. This is good.
Yeah, it's good. We're
Good
gonna
questions.
dive in these,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
gonna actually expand us as
Yeah,
well as
yeah,
be
yeah.
useful for beautiful humans.
Okay, so if I want to be feeling home, it's because what I resonate with when I talk about home is this really chaotic home space for me. So growing up, it was this constant like anger and frustration and all this like abuse and yelling, and that was like what home was. That's all I've associated home to. And so that pattern for me was repeating that cycle of like chaos because it brought me home. It created this like safety for me or this comfort for me of like, oh, this is what home feels like or what home is. And so it became this like addictive loop of like drugs and all this stuff of like, is that it? I don't think that's it. There's something deeper there.
So there's a wound that's beneath that drive. Is like, yeah, there's a creation of like what we feel comfort to. So say if we get used to the pain, we're going to inflict more pain on ourselves.
Yeah.
And a
It's
great
like
example of that is
self-sabotage.
the test they did on rats, where they had like an electric shock in the pen.
I know what it is. Sorry.
Yeah. I'll just explain this. And the rats, if they were alone, would go back and shock themselves more and more and more, and they actually started enjoying the pain.
Wow.
It was like a comfort. Whereas they'd put more rats in there, and they had like, and they put games in there, so they put like things for them to do, and they wouldn't go and electrocute themselves anymore as much. So
Wow.
that was that scientific test. But yes, you got it. So
That's crazy.
What did you
but
get?
That makes sense. It's like this loop of self-sabotage, and it goes back to kind of what we were talking about yesterday of like the oppression of like this resistance to authority and this resistance to and like wanting to be this rebel. And so in my world, I guess, of what that looked like with addiction was just like, I'm going to rebel so much because I just was so against like all of the rules and everything that was kind of keeping me constrained for so long. And it was this control that my parents had over me where I was like, I'm just going to be this rebel and completely fuck everything up and just like go balls to the wall and all this stuff. And just from this like hatred towards like this control, this level of control, I wanted to be free. And so what happens is like there's like this, that's it. It's like the freedom, the liberation that's like comes from like just letting go of all the shackles that were being, containing you for so long. And then obviously realizing that like it's actually keeping you in this very suffocating controlled loop instead of you actually being free. But it may feel free, but you get stuck in this cycle of like this free, liberated feeling of sensation when you're on drugs.
So still, what do you feel is the wound that would create you to seek that pleasure?
Yeah. So the wound of wanting to seek that pleasure is, I guess, wanting to feel not feeling that level of free in my life. I feel like there was always this like really intense this idea that I wasn't free. This like
And what is the feeling of free like? What
no
what kind of-
rules, like literally like being able to just like when I look back at my life and I look back at like when I was a kid and like all these things, it was always like restrictions. There was always like, so I always had this thing about authority. It was always like I just didn't want to listen. I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to like be in a class and listen to any kind of guidelines, directions. Even like my mom would be like, even when you were writing, she would try to teach me how to write, and I would literally be like, I don't want you to like stop. Like I want to do it. So it was always like this like fight against like authority or over someone telling me what to do. And I always had this resistance in me because I wanted to be free. And so freedom for me was always attached to like, oh, no rules, just being able to like,
But then there's this sense of freedom. It's like there's the freedom to do what I want. But then what wound makes you choose the drug or the substance or whatever it is that you become then addicted to? Like, was it the fact that it was the rebellion for you? Or do you feel like once you had already rebelled
I
and
think
there was sort of that freedom for yourself,
I
then
think,
there was...
yeah. I think like, well, for me, it's the escapism, right? So it's like, I don't feel like okay, so the first thing that I started doing was smoking weed. And like, I would literally smoke weed from the hours of like school hours because that was the only time I was out of the house. And I had to be home right away, right after school. Like that was the rule, was like I couldn't be out of the house past like whatever 5 p.m. kind of thing. So I would always like smoke weed throughout the day. As soon as I got to school, I would literally hit bong and just be stoned like the entire day from like grade 9 to like grade 12 basically. But those were just the hours so that I knew I could cover it up because I wasn't allowed to go out, I wasn't allowed to go to parties, I wasn't allowed to do anything. So that was like my field of like rebellion, of where I could escape, right? And so that was like the first kind of thing of like, okay, well, if I can't go to parties and I can't go do this and I can't go and like see my friends or I can't do whatever, I'm just gonna rebel in whatever way that I know how, of like, and this would be like me proving a point or whatever, even if it's like self-sabotaging myself. So it would be like this like constant kind of loop that I was in of like, oh, I'm doing this to get back at my parents because they're putting me in this box, and I'm gonna do this because this is me choosing something outside of the box. So that's it. It was like this, like, oh, like if this is the rules and the guidelines, how many times can I step outside of that in this time frame that I have?
And then still though, like, so I'll use an example. For me, I had the freedom to do what I wanted. And so it wasn't actually the
Rebellion,
the rebellion.
Yeah.
There was definitely, at times, there were parts of things that were rebellion. But at other times there were, yeah, it was deeper. And there's a wound there. And I have my answer for it. But do you feel like, yeah, you're happy with that answer of it being that wound for you? Yes. Yes.
Okay, let me think. Let me get out of the thought. Okay, so
So you're avoiding pain. I'll break it down a bit. So you're avoiding a pain.
okay.
What is the pain? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like wanting to feel,
You're escaping the pain, right? So you go to the pleasure.
yeah,
So what is the pain?
the pain that I'm escaping. Okay. Is okay, the pain that I'm escaping to feel this like, okay. Dude, it's so deep. Like I can literally feel it in my throat.
If it could speak, what would it say?
It's like it can't. It's like, well, it's not like it can't. It's like the feeling. Okay, I'm just gonna like talk. So like self-worth, like feeling like almost like the pain of like just like continuing the pain of like not feeling like I'm good enough, or like not feeling like I'm worthy of like anything more than just like instilling more and more pain. And like Fuck, like, what is it?
And somewhat based on any union, if you're not feeling worthy, what would be the pain? It's like when you've had a past relationship and they left and it was like a part of you left.
Attachment, and like connection, like feeling like connected, feeling like a connection to self, to feeling disconnected, feeling like this disconnection, this abandonment, feeling like the deep, like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Do you feel like that's your win?
Yeah, I feel like it's like definitely like the disconnect.
So yeah,
Abandonment.
that's my understanding that I've come to. Is that yes?
Fuck. Okay.
Is that every time that I seek something outside of myself is because I feel a disconnect in that inner union, that wholeness of self. And it's not like there's anything necessarily wrong with it. It's like it's beautiful to have this space of disconnection and seek connection outside. And yeah, it just becomes
Outsourcing versus sourcing.
yeah,
with it.
exactly, outsourcing. And I mean, at that time in my life, I just didn't know any better. Like that was just like, I just felt this pain of feeling like especially cigarettes. So for me, cigarettes, like the reason I started was because I was leaving high school and I wasn't really doing football. I wasn't really doing any of these, any of these things that gave me connection. I wasn't doing my circus anymore. I wasn't doing any of these things that brought connection. Like in the experiment with the rats I was talking about, is that they put playthings in there and suddenly the rats stopped electrocuting themselves. So what they're seeking in the electrocution is connection.
Wow.
And so, yeah, for me, that wound that is beneath any form of addiction is this seeking of connection. And then when you give it your power is when you believe that you can't connect in any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so
Because
yeah.
love is connection and fear is just a disconnection. It's just like so
Fear is like there's something outside of me I'm separate from.
yeah, exactly. The illusion of separation, which is
Exactly.
addiction.
Yeah.
Which is literally the karma. Yeah.
Beautiful. So we had one question so far, and I've got heaps here. Wow. When you engage in the addictive habit, what part of you is seeking relief? Your mind, your body, or your emotions?
Ooh. Okay, probably my body. Oh no, my mind. It's my mind because I guess prior, even currently, I would say it's always like I hate when I'm in my head, and that's when I get into or what I used to have the panic attacks. I used to have the anxiety and all these things of just creating the stories, creating the loop. And I was really good at it. And so I'm so imaginative. Yeah. Imagination's so fun. But when you're in that, it's I just wanted my head to stop. And so weed would always be so good for that. Just disconnect from, the mind, not feel safe in the mind, right? That was a big thing for me, which is the logic why I'm so afraid of the masculine, even of just oh, my mind is so scary because it brought me to depression, it brought me to suicide, it brought me to all these things because that's how far deep I would go into the cycle of the story. and I would convince myself that I wasn't good enough and I wasn't blah blah blah, and so I had this fear of my mind. But when I'm drinking or when I'm, doing whatever, I'm not in my mind anymore. I'm like just being like, I'm just in my expression or whatever, and I'm just playing and I'm laughing or whatever. And like if I'm stoned, then I'm just like watching something stupid and just like, like I'm just disconnected from being in with the body. Like I'm just disconnected from all of it.
Which is interesting, is like there's like a disconnect to reconnect.
Yeah.
If we're going back to the wound we just
Totally.
spoke about.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, there's like a disconnect from one thing to connect to another experience. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, anytime anyone asks a question like this, is in a way it's like all of them.
Yeah.
It's like mind, body, because they all have play this effect. Especially, I believe mind comes first. That's just my preference, because there were times in those addiction experiences where it was a body reaction. It was like I was having these crazy body reactions, especially when I started stopping, and you get things like withdrawals.
Yeah.
But however, as I was coming out, I learned that I was controlling the withdrawals as well. So in a way, it's the mind before the body still, but there's still often this like complete correlation for me.
Wow.
Next question.
Yeah. I love how deep that you go with it, though. I love that you have so much awareness of like even how you were in the states of withdrawal, which is something that I haven't even gone back to. That's cool that you've been able to like really assess like the mind out of the way and then into the body.
Well, I guess for me it was like, I can sort of go into it now, I guess, but for me that's what helped me stop. Is like I hit this point of like, I'm addicted. And then I was like, wait, are you addicted? Like there's a belief there.
Yeah.
That you have so ingrained in yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
And then I was like, well, no, you just have a belief. Like
Yeah.
you can
Exactly.
it's actually just a constant choice.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it was like, bam.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was no withdrawals.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
So
yeah.
that's where for me it's like, that's why I was able to compartmentalize it, because that's how I got out.
That's a huge shift, though. That's a huge shift, and our mind is so powerful in that space for sure. Because I remember, like 2 or 3 years ago, I stopped drinking, but I was still smoking weed because I had this belief that I couldn't sleep without smoking weed.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a belief, and so I ended up going to an all-inclusive for my girlfriend's wedding. And I wasn't drinking, obviously, but I was like, I needed weed. And it was like, I could bring weed to Mexico. I'm sure you could, but I didn't. Because
I was too afraid.
Yeah, I'm too afraid. And so I remember the first day that I got there, I was like on a mission to find weed, and then finally one of the bellboys was like, oh, I can get you weed or like a vape thing for $100 USD, but tomorrow. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I literally gave him $100 USD and he gave me weed the next day. But that night I had the worst sleep of my life. Like I just couldn't sleep, blah, 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 because I was like, oh, like you just can't, blah, 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 all this stuff, obviously. And then finally, got my weed and whatever. But then in the summer that year, so 2 months later or whatever, I was like, I'm going to do 75 hard and I'm just going to stop smoking weed because I don't need it. And then I didn't have any withdrawals, nothing, and blah, blah, blah. And it was just the same thing of just creating a new story where I'm like, I actually am a human and I don't need anything to get me to sleep. That's a very human thing, is to sleep, So I was like, okay, I don't need something external to sleep or to spark my hunger, because I am human and humans sleep and they eat.
Yeah. So what do you think, out of interest, created that
story?
Or the spark of when you started believing that you didn't need it anymore.
That was bringing back my power, but I didn't know that at the time.
Was it like, were you scrolling through Instagram and you saw a story, or like?
I think it was finally just like the same thing that happened. It was so when I stopped drinking, it was that same kind of realization of like, I don't want to give my power away to like anything outside of myself. So then I think I finally came to that place with weed too, and it wasn't, I don't think it was like an Instagram thing. I think it was just like a me where I was just kind of like, wait, like, hold on, pause. Like, you don't.
Yeah, I was relating it to, for me, when I was thinking about it just then, I was like, oh yeah, I must have seen something on Instagram or somewhere. And then you just reminded me, no, what it was when I first started like wanting to quit initially, and that would have been like really the first spark, because I looked back, I was so unhappy and in pain at that point, and I looked back and I was like, wow, I used to be the most happy, playful little kid that was so connected, so like, and so many friends, so was doing like all these beautiful things, and I didn't have any of this stuff that I currently have now. And I was like, well, if little me could do it, why can't old me do it? And then what helped instill that was then meeting people. I would go to bush doofs and festivals and things, and I'd meet people and they'd be like, oh, I'm sober, I'm not doing anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, so it's possible. And then like, it's like once that belief was initiated, the subconscious started believing that, and then you start having people come into your field that are already living that experience, and then it's like it just builds and builds and builds, and eventually you're like, oh, I can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is like but that's so cool that you were able to even get yourself there, of like going back to like your inner child, like or not your inner child, your actual like you as a child, because that's powerful. Like, I don't think I even was able to relate it back to like, oh, like there was a time in my life where I didn't need that. And so that's like very powerful that you were able to connect back to yourself from that space. And you're so right. A lot of the time it is like, oh, like, well, I have this possibility that's in my life that's being shown to me of someone that is, you know, sober and awesome and fun and not like, you know, which is like, I think that's also a big thing with people that are like into, you know, partying and all these things, is that there hasn't been a possibility of someone that's fun and sober. Because like, I don't know about you, man, but like when I used to party and stuff, everyone that was sober fucking sucked. Like, they honestly, they were fucking boring, you know? And then I think like what happened with me was like, this shifted so much, because like I spent the first year of me in my sobriety, I was pretty fucking boring too. And like I was boring because I was afraid of going into like the same experiences, because I was scared that I was going to go back to it, blah, 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 blah. And because I had so much judgment of the past version of myself, obviously, so I didn't want to like, you know, step on any toes. And then finally, obviously, when I came to like compassion of like, oh, like that, just wanted love, just wanted connection, right? And then was able to hold space for like that version of myself, and I started to see myself in everyone that was still partying and all this stuff. And then I was like, oh, these people are fucking awesome. I'm gonna be the most epic, awesome, sober person ever to show people that possibility. Because no one's gonna like, you know, if I'm sitting there judging someone for drinking, they're gonna be like, fuck you, I'm gonna drink even more, right? But
more disconnect.
There's more disconnect, exactly. But when you go and like you're sitting at a bar with someone and like you're just having like a fucking agua fresca or whatever, and you're just chilling and like having a good conversation with them, and like and having like a legit just human experience, like a connection, the same thing that I would do if I was like, you know, drinking, but just creating that connection again, then they get to see this possibility, and they're like, then they get inspired. They're like, holy shit, like this person's actually fucking fun, and like they're actually, you know, and they're sober, which is like, wait, what? Like, just like, that's so crazy, you know? So I think like that's such an awesome, shift when it comes to people that are sober. So if you're sober, stop being so fucking boring.
I think for me personally, the boring part comes from where where you're in that space of like judgment and of like, I've been there, like being at a festival and just being like, I don't want to be around this. I'm not feeling this frequency right now at all. And that's cool. But like, yeah, of course, the people that I was with were like, boring. See ya.
Yeah.
But then there's the beauty of like, especially knowing that you have the ability to create the effects of what people are on, whatever they're doing internally. So it's like I can go to a bar and stand there completely sober, but tap into the drunk me, which is like pretty much all the time. Yeah. Just like, but like, yeah. But that's the beauty of it, is like then you can tap into that and you no longer become boring because you're hitting that similar frequency.
Connection.
Yeah. And so yeah.
Yeah. There it is.
And I've noticed, yeah, so many people, probably the most that I've changed people has been through that.
Exactly.
It's like they say like the best teacher is one that like shows, or the best parent. Can't remember the exact saying, but
no, I love that. Thanks so much for sharing that. Yeah. So good.
so the next question is, are you using this habit to escape discomfort or to fill a void? I think we basically sort of covered that, and it was like yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes.
Nailed it.
All right, so now we're going to get more into the inner union piece of things.
Okay.
So, is your addiction a response to a lack of structure and discipline? Masculine. We're going to use these labels, but again, like masculine, feminine, there's masculine and feminine in each.
Yes.
It's just more of like a prominent energy. Gives it the label. So yes, is it a lack of structure and discipline, or a lack of flow and emotional safety when you're seeking a substance?
When I'm seeking a substance, is it more a lack of flow, structure, or I think it's a resistance to discipline. I think that there's a resistance to like the masculine.
So then it would be there's a resistance to the masculine, maybe like a lack of flow? No. A lack of structure.
Lack of structure.
But if there's a lack of structure, you'd be desiring more of it, so you would be taking the substance to have more structure.
So, okay. It goes down to a lack of like it's like the self-sabotage thing again. Right? It's like this it's still that story that I was still in, that I'm like shifting out of in real time, obviously, but it's this story of like for me to be in my power means I need to like be in that like rebellion of the authority and the control of like the system, which is the structure.
So if you're wanting to rebel, you're seeking feminine in a way, freedom
Through like, instead of creating freedom within the structure, right? So that's obviously what is like needed. And so there's like this, like I'm going to my belief is that there's power in the separation versus power in the connection of like with how things are like meant to be in like the physical, I guess.
So I mean, like as we were sort of talking about before, I feel like there's always going to be a disconnect, a separation at the same time as a connection.
Yeah.
So it's like wanting to connect more with the flow. For me, I'm going to use the word feminine, and disconnect more from the masculine.
Totally.
So
here's
so
an
in
example.
this,
Okay, so like if I am like, okay, yeah, like I eat pretty healthy throughout the day, and then at night I'm like, okay, like it's so close, just like really completing that whole day of like eating healthy, and then I'm like, oh, like I want a brownie. And then it's like, oh, like, do you want a brownie? And I'm like, yeah, well, this I just want to feel like I'm, like I deserve this or whatever. Like, like I don't want to like have the resistance to like something that like my body's telling me that I want this and blah blah blah, right? But it's like no, like there's this level of
Ooh.
like
Yeah.
discipline slash like structure of like okay, like if you want to be in like like feeling the best version of yourself, but there's something that's like coming in to like pull away from that level of like my highest optimal human form is like taking care of all aspects of myself. And it's not like to say like don't have a brownie here and there, but like every day to have some kind of like treat
Sweet.
or something is like okay, that becomes like your pattern of like your it's almost like okay, you can have like 90% of the day this, but you need just one little thing to throw it all off. Like
So, just to answer this question quickly, I want to dive into this because I have more questions about it.
Okay,
But
okay.
I feel like for me, it's
Yeah.
seeking the feminine flow.
Okay.
So like, especially with weed,
Yeah.
I was seeking comfort, which I often associated with. I mean, it's in the name, like Mary, like what's it called when you? It's called like not. Is it called Mary? Mary Jane.
Mary Jane.
Yeah, yeah. And I've always associated that with like the mother energy, and I always felt that it was like I was seeking the comfort from mother energy when I was in my pain or in my like separation.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a child, right? They seek the mother.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, yes. So for me, it's flown from safety. Yeah, are we happy with that?
Same.
Okay.
Yeah. The comfort.
So then the piece that was coming through about your next thing was, I was thinking like a conversation that we had recently, which was how can the masculine remind the feminine of her other desire? Because it's like the feminine presents these two desires. She's like, I want to be fit and healthy. And then she's like, on the day, she's like, but I want the brownie and the cookie.
Yeah.
And it's like,
this like split.
yeah. And,
right?
and it's like, who in a way has more of the power? Is it the structure to stay with the long goal, or is it the feminine going like, we're having the brownie?
And it is the masculine. It's like it is coming back to that level of like, because discipline is devotion. It is devotion, right? So it's like, how devoted am I to creating this life that I really want? It's like with anything, your mission. This is why structure is so important, and really consistency is so important. Like you see the most like successful people and the most fit people or whatever is like consistency, right? It has nothing to do with anything else. It's just like the more consistent you are with doing anything in life, like you will get there. It's just like nah. And like yeah.
Oh, masculine.
And yes, you can bring in like all the other aspects obviously, but like for this in particular, I think that yes, consistency is key. It is actually one of the key codes of the entire universe of order. It's consistency, peace, and rhythm.
So say yesterday, I was like, you can't have a brownie, or you can't have a chocolate, or whatever you decided to have. What would your reaction be?
Can I just have a little bit? But then it would go into that. It would go into like the excuses or the reasons or the whatever around it, and then it would,
At a certain point, though, if I was like, you can't, like, you literally can't, would you get angry, or like, would you get mad? Because then I'm like the structure that you're like.
So here's the thing. I think that for me, I need to be committed to the mission. And there has to be like a specific like purpose behind it for me to fulfill. That's something that means something to me. So like this is the thing with like for me, and you can share this.
No, I just had a little mini download, but continue.
Yeah, because I've done 75 hard, which is like sticking to a diet for 75 days, like literally didn't break that, and like doing like the disciplinary things for 75 days. I've done dry fasts, like I don't, you know what I mean? Like I can do these things, but Ekadashi is super important to me. So I'm devoted to the practice of Ekadashi. And so that is like meaningful and purposeful for me. But if someone's just like, it's just like a day,
and someone's like, don't have a brownie, I'm gonna be like, don't fucking tell me what to do and have a brownie.
Yeah.
So there has to be something that's there. So if it's like a 30-day challenge where I'm like, hey, I'm committed to this
Yeah.
for 30 days
Yeah, yeah.
to break this thing, I'll do it. Because I know that it's me in my power saying that I'm gonna do this thing for this amount of time, and I'm so committed to my word. So I think I just need to do that. It's like
So I was thinking about, in a way, like the rebellion to structure, especially you were saying like coming to player, all these things of like
Yeah.
rebelling against this structure. And it's because there's not a clear vision of what this structure is going to bring, right? And it's like if you were to say, okay, we're just using these examples, but if you want that fit, healthy body, and instead of me just being like, no, you can't have the brownie, no, you can't, like,
totally.
just full discipline, it's about this little reminder, which we were speaking about yesterday, of like, do you sure you want the brownie? Because you said
Yeah.
you want this.
Right. Yeah. And the
And
agreements
so-
with yourself. I think it comes back to these agreements with. Is that what you're gonna get to?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Continue though.
No. So what I was thinking just now is that like, there's also this belief that like, if I have the brownie, I'm not gonna be fit and healthy. Right. So it's like, well, I'm choosing to believe that this is not going to get me there, but I'm still working out every single day, and I'm still committed to this. Like, I'm in this, like, no matter what. Like, even this morning, I was like, fuck, like, I had like 5 hours of sleep, but I was like, I'm gonna fucking hit the gym, like, get on the bike, and then go for a run, get cash, toilet paper, and like run back to the house and like literally get ready for this meditation, right? So it was just like boom, 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 boom. But I'm still gonna make time because I told myself this morning I'm gonna do it. And every day I'm dedicated to like working out every single day.
Okay, so I feel like this is coming back to a drive conversation like we're having recently of, is like, there's emotion bound up in the end goal. It's like, when I get to this end goal, I am gonna feel like, when I'm fit and healthy, I'm gonna feel so and so, and it's like this beautiful end goal. And then what happens is like, then you have this thing that comes in, and it's like, oh, I feel like this is tying back into our connection piece. Actually, it's like, when I'm fit and healthy, I'm gonna be more seen, loved, respected, more connected. And then there's like,
why don't we embody that now of like feeling this level of like fit and healthy?
But like, ultimately, that's the same feeling is tied into eating the brownie. It's like that feeling of loved, connected, seen by the brownie. But it's like, that's where it's like,
It's the worst brownie ever.
the feminine's like, but I can have the same result here. Why are we
So it's like a.
Why are we going for the
I see. The
end
long,
goal?
Yeah, the long haul.
in a way?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Is that a thing?
That is an interesting thing that you just brought up. Because it's almost like, well, why would I? So there has to be like a connection to the long lasting result of it versus the short term,
Which is, I
which
guess,
is like everything in my life.
which is why you associate more. If you start bringing more pain,
It still is like this addiction to like pleasure.
yeah. But if you start bringing, so like saying that the brownie was bad, has now, would you say, given you this like, okay, the brownie is not bringing me this connection and love and this experience that I'm seeking, and so therefore you're giving more of your perceived emotion drive towards reaching this other state further on.
I think because of how like in my journey I am of like knowing that nothing's better, you know, it's just like so hard to like shift.
But that's
so. Tell me, yeah.
that's something that is so interesting because
Like it's like no judgment, accept everything
Yes.
and appreciate
Yes.
everything. And then like how can we use that to actually fuel our mission or what we want to like achieve or whatever, and honoring the process of getting there and creating that balance. I think it just comes down to balance, right? Like I don't like to be restricted, and I think that that's a thing of like a belief of like, oh, if I'm restricting myself, I'm controlled. And if I'm controlled, then I don't get to do what I want to do, and I'm not free because I'm controlled. And so there has to be something that's in there of like this structure you can be free in the structure. This is a very new thing for me that I discovered like 2 days ago, obviously. So we're working through it, but it is definitely like, how can I create understanding? This is the thing, that freedom is within that. That's the only way to freedom is actually through the system.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, but this is me shifting into this because I feel like the system exists, and like for us to be like, oh, like fuck the system, like I don't want to do the system, blah blah blah, right? But that again, like where the collective is at right now, the system exists, right? Like there's no like way of doing, like there is a way of doing something outside of it, but there is also like taxes and things that you have to do within the system.
I think more so what I could see is like this creation of, there's always going to be system, there's always going to be chaos and order. There's always going to be masculine, there's always going to be feminine. But what is shifting is how the interplay between those is done. So it's like the system that we're currently in, the masculine that we currently structure, that we currently have, is wanting to be changed by the feminine
Yes.
to create
Totally.
new structure, to create new systems.
Yes. So from the fear that we're in right now into like the love of like the support of the structure versus the like, oh, you have to do this or you're going to die or you're not going to make money or blah 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 blah. So there's like the fear of the structure, the fear that's being instilled for us to follow the structure versus the love of like the feminine and the vision to have the structure. So I see that and I get that, and I think that that's like definitely happening. But there's also a space of like harmony and not judging the system of where it's at right now. So I think that there comes this like, oh, like I'm gonna reject the system because it's not where I want it to be. So I'm just gonna, which is like literally no, like you have to make harmony and peace with where it's at right now because it's through love that it's gonna change.
And so, ow!
Oh my gosh!
Ow!
That was the keyest code. That was the key code.
Next key code is now you've seen the external. What happens internal? How do you bring yourself more love and acceptance for who you are now?
Yeah, of course.
And then the reflection of that.
And then to be able to evolve through that, yeah.
So for me is like, I love two parts. I love the part of me that comes back to this whole and complete, not feeling disconnected, feeling connected as one whole and complete being of like, yes, I'm perfect right now. I can be happy right now. I can be like, if nothing was to change.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's the part of me that like, I can switch into and be like, no, I want change. I want to own like a whole bunch of different things, businesses, etc., etc. Like, I want the change.
Yeah.
And so there's also this feeling of like love of growth, exactly, and love of what drives the growth, which is the not feeling whole, which is the disconnect from law and order, which is yeah.
That's.
I feel like we've gone a long way away from addiction, but I love it.
No, but it totally all connects back
Oh, yeah.
to it. Yeah, of
It
course.
does in a way.
But no, that was so powerful though. Like I feel like that was like, fuck, that needed to happen. That conversation was like fucking gold. Yeah. I'm feeling like pretty complete with like everything that I had. Do you have any other questions?
I mean, like, we got through 3 of my 20 questions.
No way.
So I will know. I will know for next time. Less questions. Definitely less
how prepared
questions.
you are though. Can I just honor and admire
Well,
and appreciate your masculine energy right now because like you
Thank
really
you.
came through, got everything sorted, came with the structure and like very organized, very directional, very channeling that energy. So thank you for bringing us into that.
That's where I'm reshifting back into.
Appreciate that. That was epic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
The whole restaurant is just like, what? Why are you saying bye?
That was epic. Hey.
Let's see what else we would have had in here. Actually, that's interesting. Next question was, if you're fully in union with yourself, balanced, whole, and at peace, would you still need this habit?
What? Oh, are we still doing?
Well, no, I'm just answering some more of these questions.
what
It's
was
like,
it?
if you were fully in union with yourself, whole and complete, would you still need the habit, the addiction? And like, I feel like we covered that, which was like, no. Yeah. And then, what would happen if instead of suppressing your urges, you sat with them and listened to what they were trying to tell you? Ooh.
So, yeah, no, that's a big thing that's coming up for me right now.
Yeah.
That's a really big thing that's coming up. It's like, it's the comfort. So it is the comfort for me. That's just,
I mean, it's trying to tell you that you're feeling disconnected.
yes.
And so, therefore, there are different modalities of reconnecting. Basically.
If you actually take the time, it's the same thing that happens with me in Ekadashi, or like a dry fast, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like, we into something, and it's like, okay, to come back to like where you're at, like, what is coming up for you right now? What is that like urge to like, you know, give yourself? It's the avoidance of escapism of literally. For me, it's the body. For me, it's like there's emotion. It's the disconnect. It's like, okay, what do I need right now? Like, do I need to just like rub my body? Do I need to just like be present with myself? And like, do I need to like go for a walk, or do I need to just like cuddle myself and just like be like give myself a massage, or just like, you know, give myself that connection back to myself, like create that, you know,
Like, support your inner feminine.
yeah,
Listen to your inner feminine.
yeah,
In a way.
yeah.
How can you create a new structure in your life that supports your healing rather than repeating the same cycles? So what structure could you place in your life that supports the healing? So I think that comes back to what I was talking about, is like certain practices or techniques that bring that back. So it's been like, for me, it's been like breath work, yoga,
Yeah.
dancing, anything that brings me present, working out, going to the gym.
Yeah.
All of these things are all ways of like, in a way, or what we're kind of talking about is like dropping out of the mind
Yeah.
and back into the body.
Yeah.
Feeling a disconnect between mind and body. Huh.
So coherence. That's why heart coherence
Yeah.
is so powerful.
Yeah.
Because when you're breathing, it's like you're really loving what's coming up in the moment. So you're like, okay, like heart coherence right away takes you out of the mind, brings you into the heart, and then brings you awareness of what's coming up for you in that moment.
Ooh. Out of them, I'm going to use the label masculine for the mind,
Yeah.
even though, again, there's like
Yeah.
two parts of the
Totally,
brain
yeah.
and the mind.
Yeah.
And then like body feminine. It's like out of the masculine into the body.
And then
Because the feminine always wants to be penetrated by the masculine. Interesting.
received and seen. And
Yeah,
heard
yeah, yeah.
And everything. So when you give it that, and you're holding that space with the feminine, who's just like asking for your attention, right? So you're giving her that attention that she needs of healing.
Well, I relate this to intimacy, like literally. There've been times where like, sex, intimacy, where I was like slapped because I was way too in my mind.
Yeah, be
And
present.
not like
Yeah,
present with her.
yeah.
And there's like a big correlation there to like
Wow.
life, when it's like
It's a thing.
pain because
Yeah.
you're not being present with the body. To here.
Yeah. That's
So
huge.
so from that, then what practice could we use in the moment?
Heart coherence.
Okay, heart coherence is yours.
Yeah, that's fun. for
Okay.
sure.
So I think mine, which I already do and which has made the biggest difference in my life, is conscious breath. So like breathing into my body, feeling my body, and breathing out. And holding a masculine structure. So I'm still holding the masculine structure for my feminine energy to move. and then being like listening to her basically.
Yeah.
And that brings me back into connection. So like, yeah, I guess everyone gets to find their
thing.
tool
Their
and their
tool.
thing
I think it's just
to
the
come back
coming
into
to
that
the
of
body.
like
Yeah.
masculine out of mind and serving and listening to the
that's
feminine.
relationship with your masculine to your feminine.